Hi, my name's John LeMay and welcome to my basement war room. Today I'm going to discuss the new Army Combat Fitness Test, and really I'm focusing on a cultural view. I'm not talking about the specifics of the test. During this video, like all videos, all views are my own. So the agenda today, I'll discuss the background, Army culture, running culture, CrossFit culture, sort of arguing that nothing has changed, address a significant alternative point of view, then take a look at your questions and comments. So please feel free to write comments throughout this video on the Facebook Live, and then I'll conclude. Okay, so let's jump into it with some background. So back in 1852, West Point implemented the first physical fitness program with a focus on gymnastics and fencing. In 1858, West Point also did the first fitness assessments for cadets. Then in 1895, the West Point Master of the Sword really pushed and implemented physical fitness training throughout the Army. And that was codified in 1906 when the first required Army-wide physical training was established. And this focused on road marches for infantry and long horseback rides for cavalry. Okay, so in 1980-ish, the current Army physical, or I shouldn't say current since it's changing, but the APFT, the Army Physical Fitness Test, was adopted. Over the 38 years, the scoring has changed many times, but the basic test has been the same. Now let me read you a little bit from the 1992 fitness manual about this test, or at least the philosophy. So in this manual, on 5 July 1950, U.S. troops who were unprepared for the physical demands of war were sent to battle. The early days of the Korean War were nothing short of disastrous, as U.S. soldiers were routed by a poorly equipped but well-trained North Korean People's Army. As American soldiers withdrew, they left behind wounded comrades and valuable equipment. Their training had not adequately prepared them to carry heavy loads. The costly lessons learned by Task Force Smith in Korea are important today as ever. If we fail to prepare our soldiers for their physically demanding wartime tasks, we are guilty of paying lip service to the principle of train as you fight. Our physical training programs must do more for our soldiers than just get them ready for the semi-annual physical fitness test, APFT. So, this is a quick blurb from the 1992 fitness manual. Okay, so the APFT is push-ups, sit-ups, and a 2-mile run. The Army Combat Fitness Test, ACFT, is a 3-repetition maximum deadlift, MDL, standing power throw, SPT, Army extension push-up, AEP. And so this is different from the regular push-up because it has a hand release. The sprint drag carry, SDC, the leg tuck, LTK, 2-mile run, 2MR. So it's age and gender neutral, but there will be MOS and unit standards. And I didn't mention that on the APFT, but that has age and gender scales for grading. Okay, I'm not really diving into the Army Combat Fitness Test. So if you want to learn more about it specifically, go ahead and check out the Army's website, www.army.mil/ACFT. And if you Google Army Combat Fitness Test or ACFT, that's the first hit. And it has a lot of information about all the research the Army's done and what muscle groups every event tests and all the Army's reasoning. So please check out that website because I'm really going to talk about culture now. So that's a little background. So now let me dive in and talk about culture. And to set this up, let me just give a general overview of one aspect of Army culture that plays into fitness culture. So first of all, culture is made up of many things, has many definitions. I'm going to use a definition from the Defense Equal Opportunity Management Institute. And that definition is culture: physical or material objects, as well as the non-material attitudes, beliefs, customs, lifestyle, and values shared by members of a society and transmitted to the next generation. Okay, so when I read that definition, of course, the first thing that pops into mind is Army values, leadership. That is Army culture. And that's certainly true, but there's many other aspects of that. And I argue that regulations and the promotion systems, evaluations, is all a huge part of Army culture. So if you look at the last part of that definition, transmitted to the next generation, well, the Army promotion system is one of the key components of who's promoted, who stays in the Army, who has leadership, and who really transmits things to the next generation. So Army promotion system is a huge part of Army culture. And the physical fitness test is formally a part of both the non-commissioned officer and officer evaluation reports. And as soldiers, whether officers, NCOs, advance, their performance becomes more and more of a snapshot. So let me break that down just a little bit. So the most important part of the evaluation is what the senior rater says. And once you get into the senior NCO ranks and probably beyond captain or even at captain and company command, senior raters have huge pools. So a brigade commander might senior rate 30 or so company commanders plus all the majors in the brigade. So if you think about someone that's senior rating, 30 to 50 people or general officers who might senior rate a lot more than that, I mean, that's way beyond the classic span of control of 3 to 7 soldiers. Can we really know 50 subordinates? Probably not. And so these evaluations, the senior rater evaluations, is done more and more on a snapshot. Small, quick impressions. A classic example for field grade officers is the ability to brief. But physical fitness is an all-important snapshot. So in CrossFit terms, physical fitness is a buy-in to getting a good evaluation. I mean, you have to be physically fit and, more importantly, be perceived as physically fit to have that good evaluation. Okay. So, and then there's another little comment on this. As soldiers on the NCO and officer side rise through the ranks, it becomes more and more of a zero defect thing. It's not entirely by any means, but it gets close to that. I mean, if you think about a field grade officer competing for command at that level, probably the last 5 to 7 evaluations have to be perfect in order to be competitive for command. So pretty close to zero defects, and same with senior NCOs. Okay, so talk a little bit about overall Army culture and really how promotion is a big part of it and how fitness can play into that. So now let's take a look at the running culture. So when I was a young soldier, this was the dominant culture. And the ability to run is a very easy snapshot. It was very common for senior raters and raters to take their subordinates out for a character assessment, which there's a profane term that goes with that. I won't repeat it here. But to take them out on a run as a character assessment. And that run was just an easy way for senior raters and raters to evaluate their subordinates and see who could do the run, who could keep up. Another common event was the unit run, where the commander goes out at say a 6:15-minute pace for 5 miles, and 60% of the formation falls out. And then at the end, after everyone is gathered back up, commander gives a rallying speech about, hey, I'm 40 years old and I can run 6:15-minute miles for 5 miles. Why can't all you 18-year-olds keep up? Get in shape. And so there's pushback against this. A lot of soldiers who were very physically fit and good at their job great on the gun line, could move around those 155 shells. We're like, hey, I can move all these heavy objects. I can do road marches. I can do everything the Army is saying. How come this snapshot of running is my buy-in to getting a good evaluation? Why are we running these crazy large unit for formation runs at crazy paces and falling out all these soldiers? We look ridiculous. Like, what is going on? What is this focus on running? So there's pushbacks, and the fact that the evaluation system is a little bit zero defect and running was all important to getting a good evaluation got a lot of pushback. And so let me transition now from the running culture into the CrossFit insurgency. So about the same time frame as our current wars, these 18-year-long wars we've been doing in Iraq and Afghanistan, CrossFit came into prominence in just general American culture, generally in America. And so CrossFit comes to prominence, and many perceive it as the unified field theory of physical fitness. Like, it is the answer. It's fantastic. And CrossFit develops a cult following. Many people are just fanatically into it. And many of these are, of course, in the military. It catches on wildly in the military. There's a perception that it's distributed from special operations to the rest of the force. And that's where all good things come from. But maybe not. But certainly there's that association of CrossFit with special operations, and becomes very, very popular. So in general, CrossFitters can also do well and run, and they do well on that snapshot. They do well on the physical fitness snapshot. They pass their buy-in to a good evaluation. They do look physically fit. And so CrossFitters start rising up through the ranks. And as they rise up through the ranks, of course, they proliferate CrossFit. When I was a student at the Command and General Staff College, Coach Glassman was one of the invited speakers who came, and in the huge auditorium lecture room, gave his CrossFit pitch to all the majors at CGSC. And so anyway, so this CrossFit sort of proliferates through the Army, and because they do well, and assume all these rise up through the ranks, and it's all through the Army. The CrossFit has a huge influence, and you can see all the CrossFit methodology now in the Army Combat Physical Fitness Test. So the CrossFit insurgency wins, and their victory fitness test. Okay, so that's CrossFit. Let me just now make an argument that really nothing's changed. So a couple narratives about the Army Combat Fitness Test. First is it's scientifically derived from the warrior tasks and replicates everything we do in combat. And maybe so. I'll just again take a look back to this 1992 manual and quote it: "Performance on the APFT is strongly linked to the soldier's fitness level and his ability to do fitness-related tasks." So the Army has believed that about their fitness test for a long time. They believed about the old fitness test, and now, of course, they believe it about the new one. It will improve soldier and unit readiness. Well, I think there is a strong argument for that, because soldiers are going to train for the test because it's such an important part of their evaluation, and it's that snapshot, buy into a good evaluation. Soldiers are going to train for the test. And the Army Combat Fitness Test is much broader than the APFT, so they may train more comprehensively to pass it. Okay. Will reduce injuries and stop stupid things like unit runs where everyone falls out. Okay, let me tell you a true story about a CrossFitter in charge and what happened. So there's a division commander, and this division commander was an avid CrossFitter, part of the CrossFit insurgency, and he got all his division staff together to do, the character assessment, physical training session. But instead of the old run at a ridiculous pace and see who can keep up, instead, this division commander had division staff on a basketball court do burpees for an hour. So it was ridiculous. Injuries were prolific. For weeks afterwards, the chief of staff and the operations officer were like limping around with wrenched backs. Again, injuries were prolific. It was quite the event. And I just argue that the opportunity to be dumb, the opportunity to do silly things is every much alive and well in the CrossFit culture as it was in the Army culture. Certainly crazy battalion runs or brigade runs or any kind of unit runs where everyone files out are like, why would you do that? Again, why would you get everyone together and do burpees on a hard surface for an hour? Anyway, so those kind of attitudes are alive and well, and while the focus may have changed, the underlying Army dynamics have not changed. The promotion system is basically the same. Snapshots are still critical, and the physical fitness snapshot is still critical. The things have changed a little bit. So I don't see a big change in that regard. Okay, let me talk about a different point of view. And this point of view is not that the Army Combat Fitness Test is the cultural victory of CrossFit, but instead it is really about women's inclusion in the combat arms. And so the narrative goes really there, like, hey, well, let me back up and sort of address that. So the Army has had, maybe cultural crisis is too strong a statement, but huge cognitive dissonance for the last 18 years, because most of that time there's been a combat exclusion policy and women were not allowed to be in combat. Yet at the same time in Iraq and Afghanistan, they're absolutely in combat constantly for the last 18 years. So women have killed untold number of enemy insurgents and soldiers during these wars. Women have died and been wounded by the hundreds in our wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and they are, unquestionably been doing all kinds of combat operations. They've been company special operations force and company infantry units. They've been thoroughly integrated into two wars that are non-contiguous. There's no front lines, no rear areas. The enemy has been everywhere, and the women have been everywhere. They've been in a direct combat role. While there's these laws, Department of Defense regulations that say, hey, no women in combat arms. So quite the cognitive dissonance in the Army. And the result of that has been, hey, now women are included in combat arms. But so say that, one thing it addressed, this has been a long time complaint, is that there's different standards. So before they're included in combat arms and other MOSs that had women, soldiers, prominently male soldiers, would say, hey, like, I do so many push-ups, she does so many push-ups, she gets more points. Like, what's going on here? That argument never really caught on until the move to include women in all combat arms, and then, maybe some senior generals were like, hey, what's going on? Susie is going to have a marked advantage as an infantry soldier over Bob as an infantry soldier because she's going to get higher scores. So we now need to have some sort of gender and age neutral test for this. And so anyway, so that's an argument, I think a strong one, that the inclusion of women in combat arms is really the catalyst that has driven the Army Combat Fitness Test. And while I acknowledge that, I think there's a lot of truth to it, I think what really happened is that was the catalyst that got the Army to maybe change after 38 years of the same test. But the CrossFit culture took advantage of that catalyst, seized the opportunity, face and shape the Army Combat Fitness Test to be what it is, a very CrossFit-like event. So, okay, so that's really the talk for today. Let me go ahead and take a moment to any comments and address them. So, okay, Warren says, and so a disadvantage of this now, by giving a talk and looking at it, I can't. So Warren says that's interesting, but isn't that true? Ridiculous applications of just about any workout regime. So I can't see exactly what part of what I was saying when you said that. But my general comment is, yeah, that is. I mean, you can take anything to the extreme. So you can take anything to the extreme for sure. I do think, though, that there's maybe a perception or a thought that changing fitness tests will cure all evils, and my general point is that's not going to cure all evils, because there'll be silliness with that too, because the base attitudes in the Army remain the same. Okay, I think also there are a couple comments over here. Let's see if I'm capable of using my own technology here. Okay, so John comments, really, that it's not a victory while there's still a 2-mile run as part of the test. And that's a good argument. I mean, the 2-mile run is the unchanged event in both of them. But instead of in the old test it being 2 minutes push-ups, 2 minutes sit-ups, and now we're going to do this 2-mile run that everyone can focus on, there's a lot more activity going on in the new test that takes a lot more time, and all those events, since the 2-mile run is last, sort of set up. Can you do the 2-mile run after having done all that other activity? So I think that's changed. But I also just think that the tradition of taking someone on that run character assessment is a big change, because now the performance on the test is going to be looked at maybe a little bit more than just the ability to go on that run with the boss, perhaps. Okay, back to Warren. Yeah, so burpees for an hour. Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's really the individual that was taking it to extreme. So in the running culture, some commanders or some people would take the running to the extreme, and now in CrossFit culture, it's that individual commander taking that to the extreme. And that's because I think that baseline, some of those baseline attitudes in Army haven't changed. So curious to know, from your perspective, what do you think is the most effective and relative fitness evaluation should be? And honestly, Warren, I don't have too much of an opinion on that. I was more interested in how the test and the change in the test is not so much actually about physical fitness, the science behind physical fitness and all that, but more about how a culture and an institution changes and what drives that. And then so when I read from the old field manual back from 1992, what they wrote in that is, hey, this test is tied to a soldier's ability to be physically fit. And now, of course, with the new test, they say, hey, it's tied to a soldier's ability to be physically fit. I mean, it's the same sort of narrative from two different eras and two different tests. I think there's more culture going on, perhaps, than science. Many would disagree. And again, one thing I do think is great about the new test, Army Combat Fitness Test, because the culture is going to drive people to train for the test. having a broader test with more events that require different abilities will produce a more broadly, I think, soldier, because people used to absolutely just train for push-ups, sit-ups, and 2-mile run. Now they've got to train for 6 different events. And if you look at the little muscle charts on the website, it covers most of the body. Okay, well, I'll give it just a quick count, see if there's any more comments by anyone, and then conclude. Okay, well, hey, thank you everyone who joined today. So if this is, well, let me back up. So thanks everyone for joining today. And this is the third in a Facebook Live series, which I'm working on doing every Friday. The primary, I guess, video series I'm doing that I put a lot more prep into is the Great Military Philosophers on Afghanistan. And so I encourage you to check the lessons of the Iraq or Afghanistan and Iraq Facebook group. We're all 7 of the Great Military Philosophers on Afghanistan videos are posted right now. They all focus on Sun Tzu applied to the war in Afghanistan, but I'll keep on progressing through other philosophers. Also, if this is interesting to you about what goes on in the Basement War Room, sign up for the newsletter on thebasementwarroom.com. Thank you again very much for joining today.